Tonight, I'm going to teach you how to fight. Not this type of fighting, but this type of fighting. The incomparable poet and author Maya Angelou, she could tell a story. She would capture your attention by beautifully stringing together both simple and intricate words, thus painting a picture in your mind. You were transported into the story. You saw it. You were there. You experienced it. So think about it. We hear and tell stories all the time. Some of our first experience with stories come from when we sat on our parents' lap as they read to us. How about story time when you were little? I can attest that I was one of the first to scamper over to sit on that multicolored woven rug in the front. I not only wanted to hear the teacher read the story, I wanted to see the pictures up close too. I lived for the pictures. How about those family gatherings where the elders sat at the dining room table exchanging stories? Or perhaps there was that one animated, potentially inebriated family member that held court at every family event. How about stories from our childhood adventures? What about those college escapades with our friends? And yeah, those are some stories that we probably don't want to ever repeat again. Then there are those not so happy stories, the painful ones that break our hearts, that carve wounds into the innermost crevices of our souls. The stories that sometimes lead us to use vices that act as a dysfunctional balm to soothe the pain away. Maybe we build an impermeable shell around ourselves, allowing no one in so that we don't ever risk being hurt again. Perhaps we are the ones inflicting pain. You know that saying, hurt people hurt people? You stay in a continuous state of chaos, leaving collateral damage behind. We all have stories. How many of you all are sitting here thinking right now, yeah, I have some stories I could tell? Maybe you're thinking, okay, so why should I share my stories? Who would really care to hear my stories? Or perhaps you're thinking, why in the world would I lower my protective shell to risk ever being hurt again? You see, our stories are a part of what makes, shapes, and molds us into who we are. So how about this? How about I tell you a story about me and my experience with loss? These losses would have a significant impact on me. I would first experience loss when I was very young. When I was 9 years old, my brother died from juvenile cirrhosis of the liver. He was 13 years old. He spent the last 2 years of his life in and out of the hospital. My parents had to juggle work and being at the hospital with my brother. This led to me becoming a latchkey kid, and I spent a significant amount of time home alone. I had to learn how to do a lot of things for myself. In fact, I remember my futile attempt at making oven fried chicken. I literally destroyed a whole chicken trying to cut it up. I then coated it with crushed cornflakes and no seasoning. Yeah, it was bad. It was really bad. I cringe now when I think about it. But trust and rest assured, I am an excellent cook now. But you know, back then, it was very difficult for me. Remember, I was only 9. I was dealing with so very much. The most agonizing part was watching my brother suffer. His suffering would end March 3rd, 1979. He would peacefully pass away with my mom and my aunt by his side. Shortly after that, I would lose my paternal grandmother, then my maternal grandfather. These losses I experienced early on led to the initial cracks in my being. Fast forward to my senior year of high school. It was an exciting time. I was getting ready to graduate, go off to college. I was practicing for my debutante ball, and yes, that is me with my cotillion escort. Well, I had this business education teacher. He was young, fun, and charismatic. All the students loved him. He was also a predator. He used the very things that students loved about him to sexually assault female students. And I was one of his victims. On that fateful winter day in mid-December, he would violently strip my youth from me. He threatened me into silence, adding to the shame I was already experiencing. You know, it seemed like there was a part of me that I had lost forever. The cracks grew longer and deeper and more splintered. It would be years before I would ever be able to speak about what happened to me. That loss was hidden deeply away. Good things, beautiful things would happen. I would meet my college sweetheart, Frank, and we would marry. We would have 6 beautiful children, but loss would creep back in. We would lose one of our twins. My little Danielle would die 36 hours after she was born. Another crack formed. We would go on with our family, fulfilling our responsibilities as parents. We would create memories, celebrate birthdays and holidays, run around like crazy with our kids with all their extracurricular activities. We definitely had our ups and we definitely had our downs. Who doesn't? It was our life and I love it. And then there was that fateful day, August 23rd, 2008. I would return home from work on a Saturday morning. You see, I was an RN and I worked the night shift. I would call Frank on my drive home from Dallas because I would be tired and our conversations would keep us awake. Keep me awake. This time, he didn't answer. So I thought, okay, maybe he got out early and he didn't hit the phone. So as I pulled into the driveway, opened the garage, there was his Suburban. I would also see 2 of our children walking our brand new puppy. "Where's your dad?" They would answer, "He's still asleep." I thought, okay, maybe he needed that. He had been working really, really hard on a business that he had just started with 2 former college teammates. I would climb the stairs, go into our room, and there he was, sleeping on his side. My usual routine would be to go take a shower and then go to bed. As I headed to bed, I remembered I needed to remind Frank to pick up one of our twins from a sleepover. I would call his name, "Frank!" He didn't answer. I pushed him. He was cold. I drew my hand back quickly, kind of crouched down, and I realized he wasn't breathing. As I raced around to his side of the bed, I noticed the bottom of his feet. They were blue. I knew then he was gone. As I got to his face, he looked like he was sleeping. He had a slight smile. He was so peaceful. You know, though this was a matter of seconds, it seemed as if time had been suspended for a moment. Perhaps God's way of letting me know he didn't suffer and he was at peace. I would call 911 and the paramedics would rush into the hospital. I can still hear the physician in my mind. After every attempt to resuscitate your husband, I'm sorry, we were not successful. I simply asked to see him. They took me to his room. I laid my head on his chest and I sang Psalm 42. He was gone. Another loss. Another crack. But this crack would weave itself throughout the cracks that already existed within me. And I would shatter completely. All of my losses had culminated. I was totally broken. You see, I could no longer compensate for the fractures that were inside of me. I still remember the woman that saved my life, Norma, my therapist. Initially, I would cry. I would try to tell my story, but the words wouldn't come. The pain was so deep. She was patient, and she was kind, and she gently guided me through the process. And then, like Maya Angelou, I began to string my words together and tell my stories. Initially, they would come out like a quiet stream, then grow like a river, and then an ocean. They would ebb and flow. Some were deep, some were shallow, sometimes rough, and sometimes still. As I unloaded all of my brokenness, it was like removing shattered glass out of a window pane. You know, things began to get better. There was new glass in the window. I could see. I had clarity. And there in the distance was that wide and vast landscape. I not only could see where I wanted to go, I could see where I needed to go with my life. Towards the end of my counseling, I remember Norma said to me, "You have been carrying an umbrella of guilt, shame, and loss for a very long time. It is time for you to put that umbrella down. Forgive yourself and those around you." The ones around me were my children. Do you remember when I talked about hurt people? My children suffered the brunt of my brokenness. I would go to each of them and apologize and work towards repairing our relationship. And it's a process that continues. After a couple of few years, I would leave nursing and I would pursue my lifelong dream of becoming a sky goddess, aka flight attendant, and today is my 4-year anniversary. You see, I am ever evolving, ever growing, and ever striving to be the best me possible. Now, as I come near the end of my time, let me share just one more story. So, a little over 2 years ago, my mom would suffer a massive stroke while she was in our hometown of Chicago. I was working at the time when she suffered a stroke. I would fly to Chicago to be by her side. Though she couldn't speak, she could communicate with thumbs up, thumbs down, and with a bit of assistance, she could scribble on a piece of paper with her right hand. She made it clear she was ready to go to heaven. You know, I remember my mom always said, if I can't be an active participant in life, then I don't want to be here. She had also told my daughter Sarah a couple of months before her stroke, you know what, I have lived a good life. I have no regrets, but I'm tired and I'm ready to go and be with God. So as the family gathered, myself and the doctor advocated for my mom. She wanted to be let go. So the last 6 days of my mom's time here on this earth, I remained by her side. I told her how much I loved her. I thanked her for all she had done for me. I apologized for all the things that I had done wrong. And I told her all the things I wanted her to tell Frank and Danielle when she got to heaven. On her final evening here on earth, myself, her baby sister, her niece, and her cousin were at her bedside. As she slipped away to heaven, I laid on her chest and I told her how much I loved her. And upon her final breath, she had one single tear run down her face. And like that, she was gone. August 30th, 2019, 7 days after the anniversary of Frank's death. Yes, I had suffered another loss, but this time things were different. There was hurt, there were tears, and there was sadness, but there were no cracks. Much like raindrops on a window, where for a moment you can't see clear, the glass is still intact. Eventually, the rain stops, the sun comes out, and the raindrops dry. And there in the distance is that beautiful landscape again. Amazing. What an incredible difference. Simply because I told my stories. Now, I want you to take a moment. What are you feeling right now? What are you experiencing? Can you feel it right here? Can you feel your stories trying to break through? Perhaps you saw parts of yourself in my story. Maybe you know someone with a similar story. My hope is that you will be inspired to tell your stories and that you will encourage others to tell their stories. They don't have to be sad stories or painful stories. They can be happy stories, funny stories, family stories, success stories. But remember, as others share their stories, listen intently. Exercise empathy when needed. Extend grace when appropriate. Lend support. You may not understand, but a simple "I hear you" can be impactful and just what that person needs to hear. If it's funny, then laugh. Wait a minute. Laugh if it's appropriate to laugh. If it makes you smile, then do that. Just smile. If it's applicable to you, then apply it. Yes, by sharing our stories makes us vulnerable and transparent, but take the risk because the reward is great. Stories facilitate dialogue and discussions. For stories build and establish relationships. Stories allow us to gain support. Collaboration and confirmation of stories brings about legitimacies. And sometimes stories start movements. We liberate ourselves from the very things that confine and hinder us from living life to its fullest. Our stories lessen the space between us. Our differences become seemingly less different. We learn to appreciate and respect one another's uniqueness. Our stories connect us. Even if we never see each other again, we are now connected. You know, life really is a journey. Sometimes we go through it with great ease and sometimes great difficulty. But as I look at each of you, I challenge you. If you have accomplishments, share. If you have stories of grief, abuse, neglect, hatred, discrimination, racism, mental health challenge, addiction, neglect, share. If you have victories, share. Fight to heal your brokenness. Fight to walk in your truth. Fight to maintain your peace. Fight for your freedom. Fight to narrow the spaces and distances that exist between us. Fight to tell your story.